When most people read the story of King Solomon, they see a golden age. They see a young, humble king asking God for wisdom. They see a shining temple in Jerusalem, endless wealth, and peace on every border. It looks like the absolute peak of Israel's history. It feels like the moment when all the ancient promises made to Abraham and David have finally come true. But the author of 1 Kings did not write this book to celebrate a golden age. He wrote it as an autopsy. 1 Kings is not a leadership manual. It is not a collection of success principles for building a great kingdom. It is a tragic narrative. It is a deliberate, carefully structured account showing how human wisdom, when separated from covenant obedience, will inevitably tear a nation in half. And the most terrifying part of this story is that the warnings do not start at the end of Solomon's life, when he is old and easily distracted. The warnings are woven into the very beginning. They are hiding in plain sight, standing right next to his greatest triumphs. Look closely at how his reign begins in 1 Kings chapter 3. The text tells us that Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of his father David. When God appears to him in a dream at Gibeon and says, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you," Solomon's response is beautiful. He acknowledges his own youth and inexperience. He does not ask for a long life. He does not ask for the death of his enemies. He asks for a discerning heart to govern the people and to distinguish between right and wrong. God is pleased with this request. He grants the wisdom, and he gives him the wealth and honor he did not ask for. We read this and assume everything is perfectly aligned. We see the wisdom and assume it guarantees his faithfulness. But the biblical author is a master of subtlety. He is already placing red flags in the text. Before the famous dream even happens, before Solomon ever asks for wisdom, 1 Kings chapter 3 opens with a detail that should make any careful reader of Scripture hold their breath. Verse 1 says that Solomon made an alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and married his daughter. Think about the heavy weight of that single sentence. Egypt, the very empire God broke in half to set his people free. The ultimate symbol of slavery and oppression, the place Israel was commanded never to return to. Now, the newly crowned king of Israel is marrying back into the house of Pharaoh to secure his political borders. He is using the old world strategies to protect the new kingdom. And the text drops another subtle shadow. It casually mentions that the people were still sacrificing at the high places because the temple of the Lord had not yet been built. And it carefully notes that Solomon himself offered sacrifices and burned incense at those high places. These are not throwaway facts. The narrator is setting up a deliberate, uneasy tension. On one side, you have Solomon's intellectual brilliance and his devotion to God. On the other side, you have a slow, quiet, almost invisible compromise of the covenant. Most readers rush past these opening verses. We want to get to the famous story of the two women and the baby. We are eager to see Solomon's legendary wisdom in action. But the narrator wants us to feel the friction first. He is showing us that a leader can have incredible insight, vast knowledge, and even the blessing of God, while simultaneously laying the groundwork for a national disaster. The text is actually giving away Solomon's eventual downfall right in the middle of his greatest achievement. Because as we are about to see, biblical wisdom and intellectual brilliance are not always the same thing. And when we look at exactly what Solomon was building with his famous mind, his true priorities become dangerously clear. To understand what is actually happening in 1 Kings, we have to understand what the biblical writers mean when they talk about wisdom. The Hebrew word for wisdom is chokmah. In our modern world, we tend to define wisdom as high intelligence. We think of it as the ability to solve complex problems, write profound literature, or hold vast amounts of information. But the biblical concept of chokmah is different. It is an active word. It begins with the idea of skill. Specifically, it is the applied skill of living well within the covenant boundaries God has set. It is not just knowing things. It is aligning your life with the grain of God's universe. At first glance, Solomon seems to have both intellectual brilliance and covenant skill. 1 Kings chapter 4 describes a mind that is almost terrifying in its capacity. The text tells us that God gave Solomon wisdom and very great insight and a breadth of understanding as measureless as the sand on the seashore. He spoke 3,000 proverbs. He wrote 1,005 songs. He could describe every kind of plant life, from the massive cedars of Lebanon to the tiny hyssop growing out of a stone wall. He taught about animals, birds, reptiles, and fish. Kings and leaders from all over the known world sent their people to Jerusalem just to listen to him speak. Solomon understood how the natural world worked. He understood administration. He understood poetry and engineering. But did he understand how to be a king of Israel? To answer that, we have to look back hundreds of years before Solomon was even born. In the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 17, Moses laid out the law of the king. God knew Israel would eventually ask for a monarch, so he provided a strict, three-part safeguard to prevent the king from becoming a tyrant. These were the only three specific rules given for the throne. First, the king must not acquire great numbers of horses for himself, and he must never make the people return to Egypt to get them. Second, he must not take many wives, or his heart will be led astray. Third, he must not accumulate large amounts of silver and gold. Horses represented military reliance. Wives represented foreign political alliances. Gold represented economic greed. God was commanding the future king to trust him for protection, peace, and provision. Now, bring those three rules back to 1 Kings. Watch what Solomon does with his massive intellect and his unprecedented era of peace. He builds a massive standing army. 1 Kings chapter 4 casually mentions that Solomon had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots. Later, the text explicitly states that Solomon's horses were imported from Egypt. He secures his borders through political marriages. He does not just marry the daughter of Pharaoh. He eventually takes 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and he rewrites the economy. The text tells us the weight of gold that came to Solomon every year was 666 talents. He makes silver as common in Jerusalem as stones. Do you see the terrifying pattern? Solomon is using his God-given intellect to systematically break the only three rules God gave for the throne. He is not failing because he is ignorant. He is failing because he has substituted intellectual power for covenant obedience. He has taken the kingdom of God and reverse-engineered it to look exactly like the empire of Egypt. It is a tragedy of misplaced wisdom. But to fully grasp how far his heart is drifting, you cannot just look at his treaties or his bank account. You have to look at his architecture. Because stone and cedar do not lie. Stone and cedar do not lie. When you want to know what a leader truly values, you do not just listen to his proverbs. You look at his architecture. In 1 Kings chapter 6, Solomon begins his defining project. He builds the temple of the Lord. It is a masterpiece. It takes 7 years to construct. Every surface is covered in carved cedar and overlaid with pure gold. It is a stunning achievement, the long-awaited fulfillment of the promise God made to his father, David. When it is finished, the glory of the Lord fills the house. If the story stopped there, Solomon would be remembered perfectly. But the author of 1 Kings places the very next detail right beside the temple, forcing us to compare them. 1 Kings chapter 7, verse 1 says, "It took Solomon 13 years, however, to complete the construction of his palace. 13 years, almost twice as long as he spent building the house of God. And the scale of his palace was staggering. One of the main halls was called the Palace of the Forest of Lebanon, because it required an entire forest of massive cedar pillars. It was significantly larger than the temple. It housed hundreds of gold shields. It featured a massive ivory throne overlaid with fine gold, flanked by 12 carved lions. The text says there was nothing like it in any other kingdom. But the biblical author is not giving us a royal tour to impress us. He is giving us an inventory to warn us. To build at this scale, Solomon needed more than just wisdom and wealth. He needed bodies. He needed cheap, endless labor. 1 Kings chapter 9 tells us exactly how he got it. The text says, King Solomon conscripted laborers from all Israel. He instituted forced labor to build the temple, his own palace, the supporting terraces, and the wall of Jerusalem. as well as the storage cities and the cities for his chariots. Pause for a second and look at the vocabulary the author is using. Forced labor, store cities, conscripted workers, chariot outposts. Where have we heard these exact phrases before? We heard them in the opening chapters of the book of Exodus. When the Israelites were slaves in Egypt, Pharaoh forced them to build store cities. Pharaoh used heavy, crushing labor to build his monuments. Pharaoh relied on a massive fleet of chariots to enforce his power. The author of 1 Kings is making a quiet, devastating point. Under the reign of the wisest king in history, Israel has become Egypt. Solomon has become a new pharaoh. He has traded the unique, covenant identity of God's people for the standard blueprint of an ancient Near Eastern empire. The nation looks incredibly successful on the outside. Silver is as common as stones. The borders are secure. The architecture is world-class. But underneath the gold, the foundation is completely rotting. The people are exhausted. The northern tribes are bearing the crushing weight of Solomon's ambition. The covenant has been compromised for the sake of political power, military might, and economic growth. Solomon's wisdom allowed him to organize the kingdom brilliantly, but his lack of obedience allowed him to slowly suffocate it. This is the tragic tension of 1 Kings. The author shows us that a nation can be economically prosperous and spiritually hollow at the exact same time. When Solomon finally dies after ruling for 40 years, he leaves behind a kingdom that is wealthy, heavily armed, and deeply divided. He leaves this heavy, glittering machine to his son, Rehoboam, and the fracture that was quietly growing underneath all that gold is about to shatter the nation almost overnight. 1 Kings chapter 12 opens with a coronation that quickly turns into a national crisis. Solomon is dead. His son, Rehoboam, travels to the northern city of Shechem to be made king. But the northern tribes are not there just to celebrate. They are exhausted. They bring a spokesman named Jeroboam, and they make a very simple, reasonable request to the new king. They say, "Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you." Notice the language. A heavy yoke, harsh labor. They are not asking for a revolution. They are asking for relief. They are asking Rehoboam to stop acting like an Egyptian pharaoh. Rehoboam asks for 3 days to think about it. First, he consults the elders who had served Solomon. Their advice is profound. They tell him, "If today you will be a servant to these people and serve them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your servants." It is the beautiful, biblical model of kingship. Power is meant to be used for the flourishing of the people. But Rehoboam rejects the elders. Instead, he turns to the young men he had grown up with. Their advice is exactly the opposite. They tell him to double down. They tell him to show absolute dominance. When the 3 days are up, Rehoboam gives his answer to the gathered nation. He says, "My father made your yoke heavy. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions." It is one of the most disastrous political speeches in biblical history. In a single breath, Rehoboam chooses tyranny over covenant. He chooses his own ego over the wisdom of the elders. The response from the northern tribes is immediate and permanent. They shout, "What share do we have in David? What part in Jesse's son? To your tents, Israel. Look after your own house, David." Just like that, the unified nation is gone. Everything David fought for, everything Solomon built, fractures in an instant. The nation tears into 2 rival kingdoms. The southern kingdom of Judah remains loyal to Rehoboam and the line of David, but the 10 northern tribes form their own nation, retaining the name Israel, and they crown Jeroboam as their king. Pause for a second and look at the movement of the story so far. The unified kingdom was not destroyed by a foreign invasion. It was not conquered by the Assyrian army or Babylonian chariots. It collapsed from the inside. It collapsed because the leaders of God's people forgot who they were supposed to be. They loved the machinery of power more than the people they were called to protect. Now, Jeroboam has a massive opportunity. Earlier in the text, God had sent a prophet to Jeroboam. The prophet tore a cloak into 12 pieces and handed 10 to Jeroboam, telling him that God was tearing the kingdom from Solomon's hands. God even made Jeroboam a stunning promise. He said, "If you do whatever I command you and walk in obedience to me, I will build you a dynasty as enduring as the one I built for David." Jeroboam has the 10 northern tribes. He has the prophetic word. He has the clear promise of God. All he has to do is trust the covenant. But true to the tragic pattern of First Kings, human calculation steps in to ruin the divine promise. Jeroboam looks at his newly formed kingdom, and he realizes there is a massive, structural problem. And out of sheer political paranoia, he is about to create a counterfeit religious system that will haunt every single page of the remaining story. Jeroboam has the 10 northern tribes. He has the prophetic word. He has the clear, undeniable promise of God. If he simply walks in obedience, God has promised to build him a lasting dynasty. But Jeroboam looks at the map, and he panics. He realizes there is a massive geographic and religious problem. The capital of the southern kingdom, Judah, is Jerusalem, and Jerusalem holds the temple. According to the covenant law, all Israelite men are required to travel to the temple in Jerusalem 3 times a year for the major festivals. Jeroboam does the political math. 1 Kings chapter 12 tells us exactly what he is thinking. He says to himself, "If these people go up to offer sacrifices at the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem, they will again give their allegiance to their lord, Rehoboam, king of Judah. They will kill me and return to King Rehoboam." Notice what is happening. God promised to protect Jeroboam's kingdom, but Jeroboam decides he needs to protect it himself. So he creates a brilliant, devastating political strategy masked as religious devotion. He decides to give the people a more convenient way to worship. He makes 2 golden calves. He places one in Bethel, at the southern border of his new kingdom. He places the other in Dan, at the far northern border. Then he says something to the people that should send chills down the spine of anyone who knows the biblical story. He says, "It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." Those are not random words. That is the exact phrase Aaron used hundreds of years earlier at the base of Mount Sinai, when he made the original golden calf while Moses was on the mountain. Jeroboam is deliberately repeating the greatest idolatry in Israel's history, but he frames it as a helpful alternative. He tells the people it is too difficult, too dangerous, and too exhausting to travel all the way to Jerusalem. He offers them local, accessible religion, and the people accept it. But Jeroboam does not stop with the calves. He systematically builds a counterfeit covenant. He builds shrines on the high places, normalizing the very thing God commanded Israel to destroy. He appoints priests from all sorts of people, completely ignoring the biblical command that priests must come from the tribe of Levi. And he invents a brand new festival in the 8th month, designed to mirror and replace the biblical Feast of Tabernacles that happens in the 7th month. New altars, new priests, new holidays, new gods. Jeroboam completely redesigns the worship of Yahweh to serve his own political security. He weaponizes religion for state control, and this decision becomes the defining poison of the northern kingdom. For the rest of the books of 1st and 2nd Kings, the biblical author will use Jeroboam as the ultimate standard of failure. As new kings take the throne in the north, over and over again, the text will repeat a haunting phrase. "He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, walking in the ways of Jeroboam and in his sin. He did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, which he had caused Israel to commit." It becomes a tragic, repetitive drumbeat. Jeroboam thought his golden calves would secure his power and protect his borders. Instead, they doom his dynasty. They set the 10 tribes of Israel on a terrifying, rapid downward spiral of spiritual amnesia. The counterfeit worship is slowly eroding the soul of the nation, and it prepares the ground for something much worse. Because this downward spiral is about to produce a king who introduces an entirely new level of darkness. Once Jeroboam builds the golden calves, the author of 1 Kings shifts the way he tells the story. He begins to track the rapid succession of kings in the northern kingdom. But he evaluates them using a completely unique standard. If you read the historical records of the ancient Near East, kings are judged by three things. They are measured by their military victories, their building projects, and their economic wealth. But the biblical author does not care about any of that. He measures every single king by one metric, and one metric only: fidelity to the covenant. The narrative moves incredibly fast. King after king takes the throne in the north. Nadab, Baasha, Elah, Zimri, Omri. It is a chaotic blur of assassinations and short-lived dynasties. Zimri, for example, assassinates the previous king, takes the throne, and rules for exactly 7 days, before the city is surrounded, and he burns the palace down over his own head. Jeroboam thought his counterfeit religion would bring political stability. Instead, it brought endless bloodshed. Some of these men are brilliant military commanders. Omri is recognized by secular historians as one of the most powerful rulers in the ancient world. He established a massive new capital city. He stabilized the region. He built a fearsome army. But the author of 1 Kings dismisses Omri's entire 12-year reign in just 8 verses. Why? Because military strategy means nothing if the heart of the nation is rotting. The text simply says, Omri did evil in the eyes of the Lord and sinned more than all those before him. That is the tragic rhythm of the divided kingdom. A king rises, rules, and dies. And the author summarizes his life with the exact same haunting refrain. He walked in the ways of Jeroboam and in his sin, which he had caused Israel to commit. It is not just a list of bad kings. It is a portrait of a nation losing its memory. They are forgetting the Exodus. They are forgetting the law. They are forgetting who God is. And this downward spiral accelerates until it hits rock bottom in the person of King Ahab. Ahab is the son of Omri. But Ahab does not just continue the sins of his father. He multiplies them. 1 Kings chapter 16 tells us that Ahab considered it trivial to commit the sins of Jeroboam. Think about that. The golden calves, the counterfeit priesthood, the fake holidays. Ahab looked at all of that and considered it a light thing. It was not enough for him. He marries Jezebel, the daughter of the king of the Sidonians. And with Jezebel comes a massive, state-sponsored shift in the religion of Israel. Jeroboam had tried to worship Yahweh through the forbidden image of golden calves. It was twisted, but it was still an attempt to claim the name of Israel's God. Ahab and Jezebel do not even bother with that. They completely abandon Yahweh. They import the worship of Baal. This is not a random choice. Baal was the Canaanite storm god. He was the god of rain, thunder, and agricultural fertility. In an ancient agrarian society, worshipping Baal was not just a religious preference. It was an economic strategy. It was a way to guarantee the harvest. Ahab and Jezebel build a temple for Baal in the capital city of Samaria. They set up an Asherah pole. They begin systematically executing the true prophets of the Lord. The spiritual darkness over the northern kingdom is absolute. The covenant seems completely shattered. The people are bowing to foreign gods for the sake of the economy. The throne is occupied by a man who has sold himself to do evil. If you are reading 1 Kings for the first time, you might think the story is over. You might think God is finally going to let the nation destroy itself. But just when the darkness seems absolute, the text turns. In the very next chapter, without any warning, a man walks onto the page. He has no backstory, no genealogy, no father named, no mother mentioned. He walks into the royal court of Ahab like a lightning strike, and he carries a message that is about to shake the entire kingdom to its core. The northern kingdom has reached its darkest point. Ahab and Jezebel have built a temple for Baal. They are systematically executing the true prophets of the Lord. The covenant seems entirely broken. And then, 1 Kings chapter 17 begins with a single, sudden sentence. Now Elijah the Tishbite, from Tishbe in Gilead, said to Ahab, "As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years, except at my word." He has no backstory, no royal lineage, no military army. Just a rugged man from the hill country walking into the most powerful and corrupt court in the ancient world. Even his name is a theological protest, Elijah. In Hebrew, Eliyahu, it means, "My God is Yahweh." Every time someone says his name, they are declaring the exact truth Ahab is trying to erase. And notice the specific nature of Elijah's threat. He does not predict an earthquake or a foreign invasion. He predicts a drought. This is not a random punishment. Baal is the Canaanite storm god. He is supposed to control the clouds, the rain, and the agricultural fertility of the earth. Elijah looks at the king and essentially says, "Your God is powerless. The God of Israel is shutting off the sky." This tension builds for 3.5 years, leading to the most famous showdown in the book of 1 Kings. Elijah challenges Ahab to gather the 450 prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. But Mount Carmel is not just a dramatic backdrop for a miracle. It is a covenant lawsuit. Elijah stands before the nation and tells them to choose. How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. The text tells us the people said nothing. The spiritual amnesia that started with Solomon's foreign alliance and Jeroboam's golden calves has completely paralyzed them. They do not know who they are anymore. So Elijah sets up the test. 2 altars, 2 sacrifices. The God who answers by fire. He is God. The prophets of Baal go first. They shout, they dance, they cut themselves with swords from morning until evening. But the biblical narrator gives us a brilliant, haunting summary of false religion. The text says, "But there was no response, no one answered, no one paid attention." Then, it is Elijah's turn. Watch what he does carefully. He does not just build an altar. He reconstructs the identity of the nation. He takes 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob. He is reminding a divided, fractured nation of who they were originally called to be. He digs a trench. He arranges the wood. And then he does something absurd in the middle of a severe, multi-year drought. He orders 4 large jars of precious water to be poured over the offering. He has them do it 3 times. The water soaks the sacrifice. It runs down the 12 stones. It fills the trench completely. Elijah does not shout. He does not dance. He prays a simple, quiet prayer. He asks God to let it be known that he is God in Israel, and that he is turning the hearts of the people back again. Instantly, the fire of the Lord falls. It is not a small spark. It is a consuming inferno. It burns up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the soil, and it licks up all the water in the trench. When the people see it, they fall prostrate and cry, "The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God." It is an incredible, cinematic triumph. If the story ended right here, it would be the perfect action narrative. The prophet wins. The king loses. The people repent. The rain finally returns. But 1 Kings is not a simple story of triumph. It is a deep, realistic portrait of the human condition. Because the very next morning, Queen Jezebel sends a message to Elijah. She promises to have him killed by the exact same time the next day. And despite calling down fire from heaven, despite seeing the nation fall on their faces, despite watching the drought end, Elijah breaks. He runs for his life. Because Elijah is about to learn a terrifying truth. Fire from heaven can prove who God is, but fire alone cannot change the human heart. And that sudden realization sends the greatest prophet in Israel running into the deep desert, begging God to let him die. Elijah is shattered. He has just called down fire from heaven. But one threat from Queen Jezebel sends him running into the wilderness. He runs for 40 days and 40 nights until he reaches Horeb, the mountain of God. This is not a random location. Horeb is another name for Mount Sinai. It is the exact place where Moses received the law. It is the birthplace of the covenant. Elijah goes back to the beginning because he believes the end has come. He hides in a cave, and the word of the Lord comes to him, asking a simple question. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Elijah pours out his despair. He says that the Israelites have rejected the covenant, torn down the altars, and put the prophets to death. He believes he is the only one left, and now the queen is trying to kill him too. God does not argue with him. Instead, he tells Elijah to go out and stand on the mountain, for the Lord is about to pass by. What happens next is the key to understanding not just Elijah's life, but the entire narrative of 1 Kings. A great and powerful wind tears the mountains apart and shatters the rocks. But the text says, the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there is an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, a fire comes, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire comes a gentle whisper, a still, small voice. When Elijah hears the whisper, he pulls his cloak over his face and steps out of the cave. He knows exactly where God is. Look back at the entire story of 1 Kings through the lens of this single moment on the mountain. From the very first chapter, everyone in this book has been looking for security or trying to build a kingdom through the wind, the earthquake, and the fire. They have been looking for power in loud, massive, overwhelming things. Solomon thought the kingdom was about a brilliant intellect, endless gold, chariots, and a palace that took 13 years to build. He chose the machinery of empire. Rehoboam thought leadership was about dominating the people with harsh words and heavy yokes. Jeroboam thought security required 2 golden calves and a state-controlled religion. Ahab and Jezebel thought prosperity meant worshiping the storm god and executing the opposition. Even Elijah himself thought that calling down a massive fire from heaven on Mount Carmel would be enough to permanently change the heart of the nation. But God is not in the wind of political dominance. He is not in the earthquake of military might. He is not in the fire of religious spectacle. He is in the quiet, daily, unglamorous obedience to the covenant. This is the central discovery of 1 Kings. It is an autopsy of what happens when the people of God trade the quiet voice of the covenant for the deafening noise of the empire. Solomon had the greatest mind in ancient history, but his massive intellect became a snare because he stopped listening to the whisper. 1 Kings stands as a permanent warning. It shows us that true biblical wisdom is not the ability to build a massive, glittering organization. True wisdom is the applied skill of living faithfully within the boundaries God has set. If this way of reading Scripture is helping you see the Bible with fresh eyes, consider subscribing so you do not miss our next study. We often read the historical books of the Bible looking for leadership principles or strategies to implement. But the author of 1 Kings has a completely different goal. He strips away all our illusions about human power and institutional success. The kingdom was never meant to be an empire. It was meant to be a people who listened to the voice of their God.